Hi, thank you for joining. Our program will start in roughly 2 minutes. Hi, welcome to Unleashing Bold Thinking in Workforce Engagement. My name is Brandie Beane, and I am a marketing project manager for Frost Sullivan, and will also be your technical guru for any technical issues throughout today's program. We have an amazing fireside chat for you today, but before we get to the discussion, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Throughout our program, we will be launching several polls that we would love for you to answer. You will also have the ability to submit questions for Michael and Michelle. To do so, select the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will conclude the fireside chat with the audience Q&A, so be sure to stay until all questions have been answered. If we do not get to your questions, no worries. We will follow up with you after the fireside chat. Now, since we live in a digital era, no live event would be complete without live tweets. So feel free to follow along with us on Twitter at @FS_events. Now, if you have any technical issues throughout the event, please reach out to myself through the chat function in Zoom. Lastly, this fireside chat will be available on demand at frost.com/engage. Please share with your friends and coworkers to spread the wealth of knowledge you're about to receive. Now, without further ado, I'd like to take a minute to introduce the stars of our program. Please welcome Michael DeSalles, Principal Analyst of the Customer Experience team here at Frost Sullivan, and joining him is Michelle Emerson-Russell, Director and Global Lead of Verizon's Workplace and Customer Experience Sales team. Now, Michael, over to you.
We're so glad that you're with us. Again, I'm Michael DeSalles, Principal Analyst with the Customer Experience team here at Frost Sullivan. I'll be both your moderator and we'll be presenting some commentary on the trends we're seeing in the workforce engagement space. And what I'm really looking forward to, like many of you, is the fireside chat portion and Q&A session with my guest, Michelle Emerson-Russell from Verizon. And our goal is to explore the present, but more importantly, the future of workforce engagement and the impact on driving everything digital for enhanced customer experiences. So just a few highlights before our fireside chat. I wanted to provide, again, some commentary to set the table, if you will. And the first is the people challenges that are inherent in contact centers, large and small, globally. Next is a look at the strategic areas of workforce engagement today and the many benefits of a laser focus on this operational area. Then I'll talk about connecting the dots. That is, ways in which the agent experience directly impacts the customer experience. And then finally, we'll dive into that fireside chat I promised with Michelle, with time at the end of the program to answer your questions. So as we focus on some of the key people challenges on the customer experience front, we've got first, understanding the changing demographics, principally millennials, Gen Z, in both the agent population and the customers who purchase your goods and services. So the question is, what motivates them? What gets them engaged, as they represent your brand? Many of you out there today deal with legacy, older, so-called workforce optimization solutions and tools that frankly aren't getting us any closer to digital transformation. Agent dissatisfaction and what I call the scourge of the customer care world is attrition. The question is, how do you find and keep the right talent? And then with scarce resources, the lack of ongoing specialized training needed today, along with that struggle to coach and develop employees for new careers and opportunities. And then finally, are we spending the right amount of technology and resources to get agents onboarded and keep them engaged with customers, and again, those brands they represent? As we look at the strategic areas of workforce engagement, there's certainly a lot of elements, and I just wanted to mention a few. What we're seeing is, for example, in the physical environment, improvements in the work environment itself, improving the health and well-being of the workforce today, and of course, the agent experience. Things like advancements in headsets, soundproofing, even office decor, frankly, can reduce stress, improve agent well-being, and cut down on the absenteeism and attrition we're seeing. Voice of the employee, being heard and acknowledged, is certainly a key component of the agent experience. We're seeing refreshed desktops and tools, and a huge increase, interestingly enough, in the use of gamification. There is a workforce engagement management focus in play today, along with emerging technologies. And then last on this list is that cross-organizational support, from technology adoption to improving the worker experiences and best practices in coaching, training, and development. So when it comes to the benefits of focusing on workforce engagement, we see some very positive results. For example, increased revenue. There's applications today to really motivate employees. There are more intelligent workflows, customer journey analytics, deeper customer insights, sentiment analysis, and frankly, better supervisor and manager training. Those are just a few components of a work engagement management strategy that can help drive sales, customer retention, and revenue. And with that, you get higher skill resources. Agents have better enhanced skills, better knowledge, and better knowledge management applications. Cost reduction. Flexibility is important. So modern workforce engagement applications today provide for a much more flexible and engaged and agile workforce. So we've got scheduling on the fly, mix and match schedules, more finite scheduling options, and of course, agent mobile access to scheduling. Things like shift bidding and other features, all of those contribute to retaining, again, that more flexible workforce. Reduced attrition, and finally, improved KPIs, or key performance indicators. We're seeing significant improvements in service level agreements by removing the processes that actually slow down the time to serve customers. And this includes agents searching for information and better routing to the right resources and the tools that can better train agents. So what we'd like to do here is introduce our first polling question. And here's the question: which workforce engagement benefits would be the key focus for your business? And the answers are increased revenue, improving agent skills, reduced costs, workforce flexibility, reducing churn, or others. And we'll give you just a sec to take a look at those and respond. So on this next slide, I think that many of you on this call recognize that employee experience definitely impacts customer experience. So making agents more empowered, more efficient is really critical right now. And with workforce reductions that we're seeing in the economy, in my opinion, there's an even more urgent need to provide rich self-service options to assist customers. So we believe that this requires an equal investment in the employee experience as well as the customer experience. We're finding that workforce engagement management tools are now really top of mind across the industry. I believe that in real time today, that agents have adapted quickly and are thriving in this hyper-expansive work-at-home environment. And as a side note, I talk to a lot of operations managers, and they report that their results, their KPIs, are better than ever. Attrition's way down, and employee survey results are excellent. We're seeing new supervisor tools and dashboards to track agent progress and performance so that agents can actually take control, take a look at their own progress. And perhaps we're on the cusp of creating a brand new class of agent. Maybe it's the super agent with enhanced capabilities who can tackle the most complex issues and technologies that can be integrated throughout the contact centers. And these solutions actually empower the agents, they improve customer experience and actual employee experience, and actually create new opportunities and deliver services faster. Well, that concludes my portion of the presentation. And right now, I'm happy to bring in our distinguished guest, Michelle Emerson-Russell from Verizon. Welcome, Michelle. Michelle, Verizon is well known as a network carrier and a cellular provider, but as you and I both know, you do so much more. Can you spend just a couple of minutes to talk about some of those other solutions you have in the market and your role?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. So first of all, my responsibility at Verizon is I work side by side with our global enterprise customers to help them define, deploy, and maintain their contact center and unified communications and collaborations platforms. So we work often with customers, like I said, sometimes in the very beginning of inception of where they're trying to ideate where they want to be, up through and including deployment of platforms and those sorts of things. What's interesting is what you just said about, people think of Verizon from our network capabilities, but there's so much more. We often are told by our customers, oh, we had no idea you did that. So everyone thinks of us as a network company, both a voice network as well as our wireless network, and of course our strong global MPLS network. But what we do as well is to help our customers transform in other ways as well. As I indicated, my little piece of the world at Verizon is in our contact center and unified communications and collaboration space. We also have a cybersecurity and network security team that works to make sure our customers have everything from a 360 perspective, that everything is safe for them in their environment. And of course, 5G, MEC, all of those sorts of things, right, for the next iteration of what network looks like. So when you look at those pieces, Michael, from an end-to-end perspective, we can help our customers transform from where they are to where they need to be from a digital perspective. And we find often that our customers are looking at that in a couple of different ways. They're either looking at there to be some sort of transformations around technology. They need to do a lift and a shift, perhaps to cloud. We have them that are in the middle of business transformation, as you indicated. They now are finding new routes to find revenue in a new environment, the way that the economy works. And then we also have customers that are looking to say, we need to make sure that we've got a shift in the way that we're giving our folks tools to be more productive in the way that they do their job. So that's really where we see a lot of our customers today, is in those three areas of transformation when it comes to technology.
Great. Thanks so much. And that is the so much more. Outstanding. So right now we have our second polling question for you, our audience. And here's the question. Where will your workforce be located in 2022? And here are the choices. Mostly on-premise, agents and employees. Mostly off-premises, that is work from home and cloud. And then finally, a hybrid situation. And thank you for your answers. Okay, Michelle, the fireplace is lit. So here's my first question for you. What do you see as major trends in the workforce, changes in contact centers? And I guess it's a two-part question. What are some of the gaps that your customers are seeing with workforce engagement in those same contact centers?
Absolutely. So I think the first piece of this is for us to look at the fact that the world has changed and it's not going back, right? As I say to folks, the genie's out of the bottle and she's not going back in. And so this digital transformation that we've been talking about and pining for a little bit here the last 5 or 7 years really has come to fruition. And it's estimated that right now 70% of all US employees are working remotely. Huge shift, right? And most of our customers are indicating that isn't going to change. They're going to continue to have a highly distributed workforce. You also look at the fact that in the low 30s, about 32% of many customers and consumers will say, I will walk away from a brand with one bad experience. And you combine that then with the third piece is that 70% of most customers indicate that they are going to be using some sort of a emerging technology, next-gen technology, to be able to service their customers, AI, machine learning, those sorts of things. So Michael, when you look at just those three pieces, it's very obvious to see that our customers have moved into a different spot as far as what they're looking to do. And in the contact center space specifically, I think as you and I, many people that are listening with us today know, it was always assumed that you could never have contact center agents work from home. Those were brick and mortar, right? There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And now what our customers are finding is that for many reasons, including the fact that we've got low unemployment, you have a much more competitive environment for finding and keeping employees, as well as you indicated, more folks and more generations that are part of the story. And one more thing is that you've got a more highly educated population of employees. So with all of those things, our customers are looking to say, I need to have support for a distributed workforce. I have low unemployment, so I have to be competitive. My customers will walk away from me if the brand experience isn't what that is. So I have to move to a spot where I really do have more engaged employees. You've got to have platforms that support that, from collaboration tools up to and including the platforms that your contact center agents use. So I would say that's the biggest shift for us we see right now, is that idea of, we know we're going to go remote. We know we've got a larger population that has different needs and assumptions of what they are comfortable with in regards to platforms and tools that they use.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So kind of sticking with that theme, working from home, and you mentioned security, which I think is critically important today. If we look at work from home, which was really a sea change for working habits, technology, and you mentioned security. Now there's been over a year. What can companies do to optimize these kinds of processes?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing is moving to cloud. So a few years ago, many of our customers were looking at going to the cloud, but they really weren't, right? You were maybe having a CIO mandate, but people were really uncomfortable in global enterprise moving to the cloud. So we saw a lot of factions within an organization that were looking to find reasons not to go to cloud. What we see now is that our customers in global enterprise are not only embracing cloud, they are having multiple people at the table with them, inclusive of their security teams, to make sure that their cloud deployment is secure, so data is secure, as well as it is something that is customizable for their employees to use, whether they're working at home, whether they're working in the office, in that work anywhere kind of environment. So I think those are the two pieces we're seeing first and foremost with how customers are looking at that. And then I think the other piece, as you indicated, is looking at the journey of your customers and looking at the journey of your employees. And it's no longer a one size fits all. So many of our customers are asking us to join them at the table with other partners to have this conversation of, what does an employee journey look like when I work from home? Well, Michael's been at home for the last 18 months. He's now going to go back to the office. You know, you're used to having working from home, a very personalized, my coffee cup sits here, my phone sits here, my PC is set up exactly to my needs. And so if people can go back to the office, at least part-time, you have to care for that as well. The journeys change. So that's where I have seen a big difference in our customers, is they're asking us to come with them earlier in the journey and start to define what their customer and their employee journey look like, and it's no longer one size fits all.
Right, right. Boy, you introduced a new term that I'm going to try and trademark, is the employee journey. I like that. Thank you very much. Next question. On top of the pandemic, businesses are facing epic workforce trends, as you talked about, especially in contact centers. So how can they accommodate the influx of millennial and Gen Z workers and address the drivers of this maybe great resignation, so to speak?
The great resignation, right?
Yeah.
And I think, again, it comes with so many pieces coming together at one time. And so we have 4 active generations in the workforce right now. And so I think we have to start with understanding that. And I look and say, there is, baby boomers, and then, there's a Gen X, where I live, and then I've got a son who's a millennial. Well, I'm very driven by technology, right? My devices are what I live by, just like my 29-year-old. However, when I want to go find information out, I go to Yahoo or to Google, right? I go look for that information and pull it back so I can make sure I trust it, and then I'll go the next step. My 29-year-old doesn't want to pull that information. He wants to go straight to YouTube and have someone give that to him. So I think we need to start looking at the ways that different generations all want sometimes the same thing, but the way we go about getting it, Michael, is very different. So I think we've got to look at that piece of it. The second piece is, as we spoke about with brand, is as important as brand is to our consumers, it's as important to our employees, especially if you look at millennials. Right, they don't tend to stay with organizations as long, in positions as long, right? And they are many times digital natives, right? And this is having everything in a very gamification sort of way to approach this is something that is part and parcel for the way they live their lives. So I think that we've got to make sure that we're understanding the different generations, what they're looking to do, and how that engagement is going to matter in the way that we attract and retain more talent. And I think that is very specifically seen in contact center agents. People are looking to say, I have positions to fill. I want to have, like you said, maybe power agents, super agents, people that we can have do several digital channels, not just take contact center calls. And our customers are really looking to figure out how they can have a more engaged contact center agent, knowing that the brand is so important, that their interaction with our customers is super important to keep them there.
Right. Lots of moving parts. So on that note, let me piggyback on your thoughts. Now that we're in the maybe post-pandemic phase, are you seeing organizations reprioritizing their spend, especially on retention and talent acquisition? And the second part of that is, if that's true, does that mean that they may have less to spend on technology? So how are you seeing organizations optimize their spend overall?
Oh, that's a big one. World peace next.
Yes.
I think if you kind of divide that into a couple pieces, I think is the best way to approach it. So again, as I spoke about, our customers in global enterprise, and I think it's probably ubiquitous, right, in all areas of the business world, are recognizing how important their brand is. And with that, they're looking to say, we need to make sure that every interaction is as quality driven as it can be. So there's a term that kind of got coined earlier this year, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's the idea of the total experience. The total experience is, if you've got a user that's happy and that person is interacting with your customers, you've now given your customers the best experience they can. So total experience is that combination of employee experience, customer experience, to give the total experience that you need to have to be able to drive your brand forward. And the reason I think that is so important is we are looking at what it means to not have an optimized workforce, but to have an engaged workforce. And that's where the tools, I think, are now coming into play with contact center agents, that we're seeing a lot of our customers focus on not just the workforce optimization tools that we've always had, but about the engagement tools as well, to make sure that the experience that you have as a contact center agent, likely in a distributed environment, means you have all that you need so that you lean forward a little bit more when you're talking with your customers. And so I think that customers are definitely paying attention to that in that employee journey, like I talked about, understand that, doing, different polls, whether it be from Gallup or whoever that might be, with their employees, to make sure you have not just satisfied employees, but you have engaged employees, which is super important, especially when you have this many folks in different generations. So I think that's the first piece. You see folks are doing that. Your second question means, are they doing that at the sacrifice of making platform decisions? I actually argue it's the opposite. What we're seeing is customers looking and saying, and this is why I believe cloud technologies is really becoming more and more prevalent in the way organizations are looking to consume contact center, is if as an employer, I need to make sure that my employees have what they need to best service our customers, my time and energy should be spent on that. And I should be looking to partners, platform providers like Verizon, like Genesys, right, like Cisco, all of those nice in contact, to make sure that somebody else is running the technology. And if you've got cloud contact center platforms, that makes that much easier, because you can look and say, I need to have it look like this. This is the number of agents I have. These are the technologies that we need to have. These are the other digital channels that we need to be able to support, in addition to live contact center agents. I want to go ahead and let my platform or my service provider partner take care of the running of it, so that I can take care of the business of it, which is your people and your customers.
Right. You mentioned something that's become so important as I talk to, contact center directors, C-levels, is this partnership that becomes largely collaborative between what used to be vendors, right? And so now it is this partnership that helps the business become, frankly, more competitive. And so that's an interesting trend that I'm seeing. Here's my next question. So we talked about the emergence of remote, flexible work models, and these are adapting to the changing nature of that workforce, right? So as we look at KPIs and measurements, have those KPIs changed? Do they need to change? And then again, forgive me for the second part of this question, how do you measure and define success? Do you do it differently, or do we need to shift? And how are we actually measuring how well we're doing?
All great questions. And what I'm finding and talking with our customers is, you mentioned this as a little bit more collaborative in the approach. I think that moving, 18 months ago, largely our customers were coming to us and they had a brand preference, or they had one of a couple of brands and they were going to put it through an RFI or an RFP, right? And I need X amount of widgets, right? And I want to make sure you have X amount of customer references, those sorts of things. But they were fairly done and dusted with how they wanted to pursue it. What we're seeing now is, because we all are very much at the advent of something very new, and we need it to be sustainable, customers are coming to us and saying, we actually would like for you to join us at the table with another partner. We want to make sure that we're bringing fewer partners into the game, but we want those partners to work together at our behest, right, in concert together. So that's one interesting thing, is that we're less getting we certainly get RFPs, don't get me wrong, but we're getting less of people understand that they know exactly what they think they know, and they know they need some help. So we're seeing that shift both in our UC and our contact center space. And then I think the other thing that we are seeing in addition to that, which I think goes back to that conversation of when we're going to move our model, then how do we still rate ourselves? So today, I think our customers are still very much using those same KPIs that we've always used, hold times, right? All those sorts of things.
Right.
What we're also now viewing is, we're seeing is people are really measuring and understanding where their customer is, right? So if by the time it comes to me as a contact center agent, I should be able to know that, Michael was actually started through Verizon.com and went to try and do a renewal of a phone, and it got here and did this. And so by the time you get to me, I have contextualized what you have seen as a customer, right? So I think that's where our customers are really starting to make sure they understand, not just we still care about hold times and all those things, but that's really about workforce optimization. That is the old brick and mortar, right? Making sure you've got enough bodies. I think what they're doing now is spending more time on the front end, understanding what's a customer's journey before they get to a live agent, so that you minimize that. And then when the live agent gets there, they have as much opportunity to do a single call resolution as they possibly could. So I think that's the next piece we're going to see, Michael, is where we start to actually quantify how successful the digital channels are before they get to a contact center agent.
Sure. So you made me think about something as we're looking at old traditional KPIs and the move maybe towards outcome-based measurements, right? Are you seeing any of that at all?
Michael, I think that the next piece of that is going to be, when it comes to outcomes-driven behavior, is to understand what portions of businesses can be measured by that. So let's go back to this Verizon idea of, right, the consumer needing to have service done or get a new wireless device. Is that going to be outcomes-driven, or is that going to be just understanding, using platforms like Pega and other things like that to make sure that I know enough about where my customer is in the journey to put him or her in the right spot, right? Is it really be more about successful journey mapping and the algorithms, right, that support that? And then looking and saying the outcomes might be on more solutions-driven small business sort of contact centers, where you've got that shared experience and that shared outcome and measurement from that.
Well, thank you for your perspective on that. I'm also seeing opportunities, and it's nascent, where agents are giving a predictable outcome on their screens, that kind of thing, and that managers can manage to that as they coach and develop folks. So I've got another, and this is my final, I promise, two-part question, and this is a biggie. Clearly from this conversation, we all know that we're dealing with change, which is constant and it's fast. So Michelle, what does the workplace of the future in a contact center world look like to you?
I think that just the workforce in general, I think it's distributed. I think we have to have contextualized experiences depending upon the user. I think it is going to be remote. It's going to be wireless first, and it needs to be secure.
Okay. So on that note, just to finalize things, what technology and service features would you recommend organizations evaluate and adopt to put themselves on the right path and be able to better adapt to the future? How should they be thinking?
Not to be repetitive, but cloud. Again, because the cloud technologies just allow our customers to focus on their business and not the plumbing to run the business. So I think that that's really important. It also allows you to have often a best in breed, right, versus a best in suite. So I can look and say, I like this tool from this, I like this tool from this, and I'm doing it in a cloud environment that's all secure, that gives our customers a lot more capabilities to change directions. I think if nothing else, what this taught us is what we believe to be true today could be completely untrue tomorrow. And so you want to make sure that you've got a flexible cloud environment that will allow you to do that. So I think that's the first piece. And I think that it can be best in suite, it can be best in breed. Our customers are more and more stepping away from brand and starting with capabilities, and then going from there. So I think that's the first piece. Second piece is having more people within an organization at the table having the conversation is really important. And what I mean by that is we all tend to be very siloed. So if you are a person that's responsible for contact center agents and a platform, you're worried about the technology that's supporting that. If you are an HR person within that contact center, you're worried about the optimization, the engagement, right? All of those sorts of things. However, there's other pieces. Again, like I talked about, you want to have the security folks at the table from the very beginning to help make sure that what you build will keep your data and your agent's data secure. But then you also, I think, want to make sure that you have other people at the table that understand what is going on as far as the labor pool and what the unemployment is like in the specific areas of those contact centers and where you're looking. Who are the folks that run your enterprise UC, right? Do you make sure that you've got, whether it's Teams or it's Slack or it's WebEx, through the services, what do you have to make sure that your agents are completely supported so they can make decisions on the fly, they can make better informed decisions. They could IM with somebody, right, and have it come in, be able to have your Slack set up so that when somebody, types it in, they can go ahead and get the status of a trouble report for a customer. There's any number of those tools that can directly influence both the engagement of your employees and the health of your brand by the way in which you service your customers. So I think that's to me, one of the most important pieces for customers to do today is to take that step back and have a little more inclusive and cognitive diversity at the table when you're making decisions about platforms, about the journey of your customers and your employees.
Great, thank you. This question wasn't on my list, but you made me think about it. The importance of cloud, which we've talked about for probably a decade. There are probably some folks in this audience that are reticent about moving to the cloud, Michelle. They worry about things like security, IT involvement, cost, rip and replace. What would you tell them?
I would agree with them. Those are all legitimate items you have to address. And when I think you should start with security. And what I mean by that is, before anything else can be true, you have to make sure that the data of your customers, the data of your business, and even the privacy of your agents is cared for. So you want to make sure that when you are looking at cloud platforms, you understand, what needs to be true for your security constraints within your organization. So I would always start with that. And again, what we saw a few years ago is security teams were brought in at the end, and usually we're in a spot where, whether implied, right, or directed, was to poke holes, right, not to come with solutions. What we're seeing now is that all of our organizations, from the top down, they are saying, go do cloud, but let's do it securely. So I want to start with that. Then the second piece of that is, what we have found in the last 18 months is people had to move to cloud. And in environments where they weren't in cloud, so we have obviously many of our customers that had, as part of their network, they had their contact center or collab platforms that they ran and they owned. They sat in their data centers and they were geographically dispersed. But when you sent everybody home, you no longer had the way to have common pathways from a voice perspective, from a data perspective, from a network perspective. So customers had to really expand very quickly their network capabilities to make sure they could service all their employees from home. They were no longer sitting in a data center or attached to a data center. So you really could have a better DR plan if you have a cloud platform that is geo-redundant, right, highly available, those sorts of things. But I think our customers are understanding now that the idea that if I can see it, put my arms around it, means that it's safer, isn't actually the case. And when we all went home, people that had cloud platforms that were already IP enabled had a much easier shift for their employees than those that were running CPE into their data centers.
Sure. Okay. So maybe our next webinar will be around maybe cloud movement, security, the things that people think about and that are really important in today's environment. You mentioned that one where some customers are forced to move to the cloud. An interesting premise. Well, Michelle, that kind of ends my formal questions around our fireside chat. And here's an opportunity for our third polling question. And here's our third polling question. Are you utilizing any of the following technologies to improve customer experience and drive agent productivity? We have multiple choice here: workforce optimization or workforce engagement, employee tools, knowledge bases and dashboards, self-service and omni-channel options, AI and machine learning, virtual agents and chatbots, and then finally, customer interaction reports with insights. So right now, as you finish that last polling question, we'd like to open the session for questions that you, our audience, have submitted, and we've got quite a few. Some of you submitted them ahead of time and during our presentation. So Michelle, we're going to strap on and see what we've got. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Here's our first question. Our workforce is primarily remote. Agent turnover is a concern for us. Are there any tools or services you see that can improve the agent or employee experience, maybe employee journey?
We definitely are in a spot where learning what that means to have remote employees and be able to gauge their engagement is something that is definitely everyone is still working with different partners to anticipate that. What I have found is, again, making sure that your employees that are working from home have the tools that they need. And one of the things that Verizon did, right, we obviously have a very, very large contact center. And we often use the folks in that contact center to help us make sure that the offers we have for our customers make sense. So we spend a lot of time with them. But one of the things when our agents went home, and most of them are going to stay remote as well, is they all have a backup kit. So they've got, they've got their kit that gave them their laptop, their screen, headset, mouse, right, all of that kind of stuff. What we found is if any of those things happened and it took even a day to get that turned around at best case, what kind of productivity did we lose? So what we've done is we've made sure that of every component, those auxiliary components, each agent has a duplicate of that. So if my headset dies, I've got it. If my router dies, I've got it, right? So we were able to look at those packages and understand the difference between an agent being out for 1 day versus 1 hour. What did that mean for productivity? So I think that's one of the things to make sure is from a productivity perspective that you've got the tools in place that make it really easy for your employees. I think the other thing to think about is, and this goes back to that the number of folks that are in generationally coming into the workplace, is they have a set of expectations that they will consume technology in the office like they can consume technology at home. So making sure that people are using YouTube and those sorts of things so that their agents know how to configure something when they first get it, right, or do those sorts of things is really important. And then I think the other piece is making sure that that agents and supervisors are connected through several places, right? So that there's obviously the ability to continue to, ride alongs, right, by listening in and things of that nature. But how do we make sure that you've got them set up for, again, like a Slack or, Teams or something of that nature to have that real time? And I think that's also important, Michael, as we move forward, to look at how we keep people engaged. And if you think about it, when folks went home, the reason that many companies did not have a reduction in productivity, even though the world was completely, it was very havoc driven right then, is we really all kind of drafted off of the experience we had with each other. So think about a contact center agent or a group of contact center agents. Some of them there for 6 months, some of them there for 12 months, some of them there for 6 years, right? And anywhere in between. The folks that have been there longer and were working side by side already knew to go ahead and send an IM to somebody if they needed help because they knew that person. They'd already had the benefit of that culture. People that are coming in don't have that benefit. So how do we make sure that in a hybrid distributed environment, those agents have the tools they need to build a community, right? So one of the things, for example, that Verizon is doing for our customers is with our asset blue jeans, right? We are now setting things up so there is in the newest iteration, you can have avatars. you could actually have what we call a coffee drop-in. So you and I can have our avatar. I can have a 15-minute break. I can go in there, drop into your conversation. We can have, we can chit-chat about those sorts of things. You can have some gamification. So I think those are the next set of tools that we'll need to do to make sure that we continue to be able to measure the engagement of employees. And then I think just from productivity, really, it's the same set of KPIs, it's the same set of tools. We are seeing many of our customers saying to their agents, hey, you know what? It's okay if you're going to have a split shift, right? We can cover it this way. So there's a lot of those things that are happening to make sure that you can measure how engaged you have employees and how long they're staying, and is there a reduction in your churn as far as employees go?
It gets complicated to me because the applications change continually, and on some level, it's a matter of keeping up, right? We've got another question, and Michelle, this is around the generational makeup you mentioned of the employee population. You also mentioned culture in your last answer. So here's the question. Our agent workforce continues to get younger. Any advice on creating a remote or hybrid culture that younger agents would welcome and embrace?
Well, I have to send $5 a person to answer that question, because that was a little bit right of what I just answered. So
Yeah.
I think it really is, Michael. We have a unique ability, and by we I just mean generationally where we are, to be able to look at what a digital transformation actually does. And I think the first piece of that obviously is that we've all moved to a distributed workforce. We tried to use actually not hybrid or remote at Verizon, but rather distributed, so that you don't end up having a class system. So I think that's one thing to think about, right? Which is defining the roles that are remote 100%, define the roles that are in the office 100%, define the roles that are someplace in between. So it's a very distributed workforce. So I think that that's really important for a company to identify what that's going to be by job, understanding what that role is and how they interface, and understand that can change right with time. So I think that's the first thing, is really having role clarity and understanding, do jobs need to have any time in the office or not? The second piece is, like as I was just talking about with the blue jeans, coffee break kind of environment, is we need to care for our folks that are have been in the workforce for a while, and want to make sure that they have what's very comfortable to them and can best service what their customers need, and kind of help them steady state what they've been comfortable with all these years, but with some tools and access to their supervisor, things of that nature. However, I think when you look at the folks that are coming in, millennials are already making huge impacts within that, but even Gen Z and where that's going to come from, is we do have to recognize that for all intents and purposes, everyone in that is, if not a digital native, pretty darn close, right? Yeah. So everything, every tool that they're used to in their personal life is digital, and they don't make phone calls to customer service, right? They use all these other tools. So how do we make sure that the tools they use in their personal life are the tools we give them to interact with a culture of inclusiveness? And so I think it is making sure that you're not just going back to back from call to call, but you do have some built-in times people can come together and have that water cooler kind of conversation, because that is what builds a culture. And if you think about it, especially in a contact center, and it's been a lot of years since I worked in a contact center as an agent, right, in my early 20s. But in that break is where you got to know people, and that's where you got to say to somebody, lean back out of your cube and say, this person's asked me for this, and someone tells you blue, the answer is blue, right? We don't have that anymore. So we've got to give people the tools with collaboration to be able to do that.
Yeah, that old-fashioned tribal knowledge, right, is certainly fading away. I, as a contact center supervisor, remember that well. And so we really put a high value on the folks that have been there as coaches, the kind of people that roam around and help others, right? I'm not sure that kind of culture is there today in contact centers. What we've got here, Michelle, is an opportunity for the audience to connect with Verizon, because I think Verizon's been a really big part of this fireside chat, and we'd like to keep the conversation going. So let me pose a question to the audience here. And it is, how would you like to connect with Verizon? One, learn more about Verizon's contact center and customer experience solutions, schedule a one-on-one consultation, hear about a case study where Verizon Cloud Contact Center has actually helped customers, or all of the above. And while you're finishing that, let's queue up another question that came in from the audience. This question looks like it might be for me, Michelle, but feel free to chime in. It says, you mentioned a huge increase in the use of gamification. What makes this important? Great question. I'm going to give that person $5 too. I think that there are essentially, 3 or 4 really important benefits of gamification in learning. One is it makes it fun and interactive, right? It almost creates an addiction to learning. It also gives learners the opportunity to see real world application and gives them real-time feedback. So bottom line, gamification really enhances the learning experience. When I was a contact center supervisor, we didn't have anything nearly as fun to engage agents to make learning the kind of thing they look forward to. Because at the end of the day, I think that gamification can dramatically increase, motivating agents to change their behaviors, participate in team building, and that all-important collaboration you talked about, Michelle.
Yeah, Michael, I concur 100% that it's almost unfortunate we call it gamification because I think people sometimes don't understand the importance of it, right?
Right.
But we have it at Verizon, right? You get badges for different things, and we've got something right now going on, with some of the folks in our team where we want them to go talk to more people, right, and have more conversations. So we've got something going on for gamification that's around new logo conversations with our customers, right? So I think that regardless of whether it's contact center agent or anywhere in a customer's in a global enterprise environment, that gamification to get people, again, it's the leaning in. I feel like sometimes we overuse the word engagement now, but it really is so important, and it is, our customers feel it. So I think that's why when you look at the contact center, environment, it's so specifically important, is your customers can tell when you have engaged employees. And so your customers can tell that, and your employees can tell when you want them to be engaged and you're giving them the tools to be engaged and not just check a box.
Sure, absolutely. So very last question, and forgive me if it's redundant, but I see you as a visionary person that really casts a vision looking forward. What does Verizon's workplace of the future look like, if that's any different from what you've already described?
Like I said, I think if you look at what Verizon is as an employer, we are very much a distributed workforce, and we have so many different avenues, right? What our retail customers do, our retail workers do, right, versus what someone that is a remote agent that supports our consumer group, or my team that handles global enterprise. So however those are differently, but I would tell you what in general, beyond what we're doing just for ourselves, really how we see the workforce of the future. And I mentioned this somewhat earlier, is it's definitely right distributed, definitely a wireless first, wireless only, right, sort of approach to things. How can we best service people that are going to be working any place? It's contextualized. You need to give your people the tools they need to do their job in the best way they can. You want it to be repeatable so that when a new person comes on, as I said, they get their box, they have the directions, perhaps they have a YouTube link to that, or they've got someone that's going to help them walk through live to get those things done. I think those are the first 3 things that you're going to see. And then I think, again, it has to be secure. We just can't say that enough. If you don't have end-to-end security and looking at all avenues of what that means, especially with contact center agents, both their privacy or perhaps your customer's privacy because an agent has a roommate, right? All of those things have got to be cared for. So it's wireless first, right? It's secure, it's customizable, and contextualized and repeatable.
Right. Can't say enough about security, really can't. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being with us. This was a fantastic fireside chat. I learned a lot, lots of new ideas. And audience, we're out of time, and we apologize if we were not able to get to your question, but a member of either Frost & Sullivan's team or the folks at Verizon will reach out to you to address it. So thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. This is Michael DeSalles signing off.